Hello everyone. Happy Tuesday. We are just flying through July here, and I'm so excited to talk about tonight's topic, label reading with chronic kidney disease. So, I've covered this topic before, but we always need a little bit of a review. Thanks so much for joining. There's been a lot of growth in the group over the last couple of weeks. So if you're new here, thanks so much for joining. Kidney support, nutrition, recipes, and tips for CKD is a community of support. I'm a dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. My name's Emily. I started this group a few years ago as an opportunity for those living with chronic kidney disease to collaborate. And, if you're like any of the patients I've worked with over the years, reading food labels can be a challenge. Often, when we get a diagnosis of kidney disease, maybe we got a piece of paper from our doctor, maybe we didn't, maybe we've gone down the rabbit hole of Dr. Google, and now maybe we're very confused about what foods we should and shouldn't eat and feel like we can't have anything that has a label on it. But labels are actually a really big tool for us, and they can help us to have a bit more variety in our diet and help us to have informed decisions when we are having food. So I'm really excited to do a bit of a dive into label reading. So if you're here and you're watching, let me know in the comment section whether or not you read food labels right now. Maybe this is brand new information for you and it's not a review. So as we get started here, I would love to know, where are you at right now with labels? So I think that labels can give us a lot of information, and there's three kind of main things that we get out of a label. So obviously we get the ingredient list, right? We also get the nutrition facts table, and then we also get things about the nutrient content claims and health claims. And sometimes those are like the buzzwords that we see on labels. So it's important that we think about each of these things when we're reading the food label. So here in Canada, though, not everything is going to have a food label. So fresh fruits and vegetables, raw meats and poultry, or fish and seafood, some baked goods if they're individual items, alcohol, bulk food, depending on where you're buying your food, right? If you get it at a farmer's market or a craft show, or if it's an individual portion of thing, those things aren't going to have food labels on them. But there are still lots of foods that will have food labels on them that can give us information to make healthier choices. So let's start with the ingredient list. So that's something we're probably most familiar with, and that is going to have all of the things that are in a food. So if it was something like crackers, for example, so we'll see things like whole grain wheat, vegetable oil, seasonings, garlic powder, onion powder, etc. And the ingredients are actually listed in weight. So the first few ingredients have the most amount of weight in it. And then sugars are a new thing here, where it's going to say the word sugar and then it will have the items in brackets afterwards. So for example, there might be like brown sugar, there could be corn maltodextrin, there could be different types of sugars in a product, and so you'll see that all kind of grouped together. The nice thing about the ingredient section is that we can always look for that word whole. So things like whole grain flour, whole grain wheat, whole grain oats. When we have kidney disease, it's okay for us to have those whole grains still. Not only are they going to have a lot more fiber, so they help to keep us full, but they can also help with constipation. They can help with managing our cholesterol and our blood sugar levels. And so it's important that we do look for those whole foods. Now, when we look at the nutrition facts table, that's where we're going to see things that have those 12 different nutrients, as well as our serving size and our calories. And that's where you'll see things about potassium as well. Whereas in the ingredient list, this is where you're going to see more of that added phosphorus. So if you're here and you're watching live, let me know if you read food labels for added phosphorus. That's that sneaky PHOS in the ingredient list that you might see. So added phosphorus is one of the things in the ingredient list that we often want to avoid. So added phosphorus, we absorb 100% of it, compared to natural phosphorus, like phosphorus we find in whole grains, we actually only absorb about 40 to 60% of it. So not necessarily something we need to avoid, whereas that added phosphorus, that's something we really want to avoid. And I am going to share a couple of resources to help you find those. So the nutrition facts table, that's what's gonna give us a bit of information about things like the protein and the sodium and the potassium. It may have phosphorus, but that's not a mandatory thing for it to have on it. Jane's saying sometimes she forgets. We're human, right? It's not about being perfect, it's about progress. So, if we never read food labels, maybe we try to read one new package a day. Or, if you are buying something new, Jane, maybe that's when you read the food label. In the nutrition facts area of the food label, this is where we can find out if a food has a little or a lot, right? So generally things that have 5% or less means that there's a little bit in that. So 5% or less, those are things we want to look for, things like sodium, right? Maybe that's something like saturated fat we look for. Whereas maybe we want more of things like fiber. Maybe we want more of things like iron, depending on our overall diet. And similarly, potassium. Maybe that's something we want at 5% or less as well. And we can use the nutrition facts table to help us determine, how much of these things can we fit into our diet. So obviously the serving size is going to be at the top, and that's not necessarily how much you should or need to be eating, but that's just generally what the nutrition facts table is based off of. So for these Triscuits, it's based off of 6 crackers. Maybe you're only going to have 3 crackers, so you could divide all of the information in half. And that's a nice little trick if you are looking at something where you see, oh, the sodium is more than 5%. It's 10%. So I'm only going to have half of this serving, and that's going to help bring the sodium level back into check. So the nutrition facts table can be helpful in that sense as well. And then these nutrient content claims. So those are the things that we often will see on the front of the package. Those are things where it will say like lightly salted, or no added salt, or high in fiber, or a source of fiber, or vitamin D, or sometimes we also see things that say like free or 0 or without. So for example, this one says no artificial colors and flavors. These statements can sometimes be about a nutrient in there, and they claim something on the package. So often it'll say reduced sodium. That actually only means that it's about 25% reduced compared to the original one. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's no salt or low amounts of salt in it. So reading the nutrition facts table is still really important when we are looking at the food labels. All right. Dorian checks all of her labels. That's great. Yeah, I think that that's something for us to remember, right? Because we often, it's not about getting rid of some of our favorite foods. So let's take, for example, what do I have here? Just looking for a label that might be a little bit higher. Okay, let's take these little mochi ice cream treats, okay? So whenever I'm reading a food label, the first thing excuse me. Unfortunately, there's no mute on Facebook, sorry. The first thing I always look for is the ingredient list. So I would always look to see in this if there's any added phosphorus as my first option. And so, no, I don't see any, so that's great. Then I'm going to look at the nutrition facts table. So knowing that this is a dessert, maybe the thing I'm most concerned about is something like sugars. So in 2 mochi, there is 15% of my day in sugar. Generally, we know we want to try to have those things around 5. So maybe instead of 2 mochi, I might have just 1. Similarly, if we're having things like breads or cakes or cookies or pasta or yogurts or things like that, we can modify the portion size to help keep it more in check to what our goal is. And depending on your other health conditions or your stage of kidney disease, you may be looking at just sodium, or maybe you're looking at sugar and sodium. And so the nutrition facts tables are really, really great ways of giving us information. And I also like because we can compare things. So, for example, we were talking about our Triscuits before. So we can use the nutrition facts table to compare two different types of Triscuits. So the sweet potato and roasted onion, that's 4 crackers or 19 grams. But the cracked pepper and olive oil is 6 crackers and 29 grams. So we know that when we're thinking about a serving size, we probably want to be comparing apples to apples. And right now, 29 versus 19 grams are very different serving sizes. Fortunately, we're actually doing some changes here with our labels, and they will start to becoming more standardized. So that's good. But right now, we need to do a little bit of math. So really, we're not actually having 6 crackers versus 4 crackers. We're probably having close to, actually, if we multiply 19, yeah, we would be doing 6 and 6 when we do our little bit of math. So that's fine. So we can actually compare apples to apples, but we have to do the math. But soon we will not have to. Now, that being said, from a salt perspective, the cracked pepper and olive oil has 6%, whereas the sweet potato and roasted onion will have about 3%. So, even though they're both flavored, we can see that there's quite a difference in the salt. Similarly, the protein amounts. So the black pepper has 3 grams, and the sweet potato has 3 grams as well. We can use the food label to compare products when we're at the grocery store to make a more informed choice. So that's how I like to use them. And in terms of, if we're having any new products, if we're buying a new cracker, we're buying a new cereal, those sort of things, that's really a good time to be looking at them now. Food manufacturers can change the nutrition information anytime. So once in a while, it may be helpful, Jane, to just take a peek at some of those regular items that we order or that we buy. When we think about, label reading, it's really focusing on those whole foods. So trying to choose, whole, unprocessed things as often as possible. So fruits and vegetables, lean meats, plant-based proteins, and grains are going to have no labels on them. And when we are choosing things that have labels on them, look for things that have simpler ingredient lists. Things that might have low sodium or no added salt. Reading the nutrition facts table for that 5% or less. Using that for things like sodium and sugar and saturated fat. And then making sure we're not getting those hidden sources of phosphorus, right? So things that have a lot of seasonings or salts in them will often have that added phosphorus. And there's lots of resources online for like smartphone apps that can help you track your salt intake or, help you read labels as well, if you are looking for kind of some easy strategies to determine whether or not a food is, healthful or not. But it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, all foods can kind of fit when we have kidney disease. It's just really about how much and how often we have some of those foods. And that's where the nutrition label is really helpful to determine, a portion size of things. So certainly each of us has very different diet needs, and working with your healthcare team and your dietitian to really understand what your own needs are and speaking with them before making any diet changes is always helpful. But we can use the nutrition label to really help us navigate including some of our favorite foods, because that's what, life is so wonderful and we get to enjoy food. It's something so amazing that we can give to our body, but we also want to make sure that we're including some of those of our favorite foods. So the nutrition label is a really good way of doing that. So as we're getting kind of wrapped up here, I'd love to know if you have any questions about, reading food labels, using food labels. These sessions, I love putting together the content and thinking about things, but really they're meant for you. So now is a great opportunity to kind of ask those questions. Let me know if there's any products that you're confused about or want some clarification. Because this is, it's a community of support. So we're here to help for sure. I've posted a couple of resources in the comment section on label reading, so a blog post and then also a handout that goes through some of those claims. So feel free to take a look at those. But if any questions do come out, please make sure to put them in the comment section. If you watch the replay, let me know as well. I always love seeing who popped on afterwards. But thank you so much for being here and asking all of your great questions. Hope you have a great night.